Welcome to Modern Musings, conversations with the maiden, mother, and crone, where we look at ourselves and the world through the lens of the 21st century. Hi, and welcome back to Modern Musings. I'm your hostess, Cindy Murray. I'm here with my co-hosts, Kristen Blakely and Amber Jones.
Hi.
Hello.
This week, we're talking about a book that was sent to me from someone close to me. And I want to read you, the book is called Anatomy of an Epidemic. And I want to read to you the back cover of this book, or a portion of it. In this astonishing and startling book, award-winning science and history writer Robert Whitaker investigates a medical mystery. Why has the number of disabled mentally ill in the United States tripled over the past 2 decades? That's a
Staggering number.
That's a staggering number. It
Yeah,
is.
that's
Totally.
very interesting.
Tripled in the past 2 decades. I started this book. I took it with a grain of salt. The person who sent it to me is someone very close to me, who adheres very much to the kind of some of the principles that Robert Whitaker is putting forth in this book. And I was not so much of that thing. So I kind of went into it thinking I'm going to play devil's advocate against everything this guy says. And I went into it reading it that way. Like I just don't believe what he's saying. But over the course of this book, I totally turned my point of view around to the point that I have decided that I would like to wean myself off of any kind of neuroleptic drugs, including my antidepressant. And it's going to take some time, but I want to talk to you about why this book is so profound. And I'm going to start with some questions for you guys, and then we can talk about what Robert Whitaker has to say about it.
Okay.
I want to start out by asking you, if psychiatric medications are more effective than ever, we're assuming that they are, right? Then why have those rates of mental illness disability continued to rise?
Oh, well, you want my thoughts and feelings on that?
Well, what explanations other than medication failure could account for the trend?
In playing the devil's advocate, the logical thought pattern you would have is that, mental health is on the rise because we have better diagnosis.
That is
right?
a reason.
Well,
And
there's one
more
way to look at
access to health care, right? These are the narratives that we hear. We have more access to health care, more diagnosis. The diagnosis is broader and more defined.
Right.
So like going to the loony bin is a little bit different now because not everyone who has an emotion is thrown in the loony bin. Like they were, quote unquote, like in the 50s, right? And so 50s, 60s or whenever, when it seemed like it was on the rise. So to me, just thinking like my mind just going, well, there's a logical reason for that. It's because we have better health care.
And that was that was actually my thought as well.
Okay, and I know you're going to argue with that because I know my statement is wrong, but that's just what normal people think.
Yeah.
That's the bill of sale that has been offered to us, right?
That is. That's what I'm saying. That's the narrative.
Like
that's being pushed.
there are, if you'll go on like any streaming service that has advertising or anything like that, most of the advertisements on there are for some kind of drug, especially a mental health drug. And you're watching these advertisements and you're like, and you're sad maybe. And you're like, I want to be that happy person in that ad. I need this. And I'm not saying that these don't work, but your original question was like, What was the original question?
If psychiatric medicines are working, then why are there
is there such a higher rate of disability related to mental illness?
Well, see, so and I'm pretty sure that he's and this is a point that he does make in the book, is that yes, they work, but they're not long-term sustainable working.
We will get to that. So when we say that these rates of disability are growing and increasing, and we are talking, we're talking about people who, say prior to the invent of these medications, if you look at the way historically mental institutions worked, people were put in. Less people were hospitalized, obviously, but they were also all lumped into the same category of schizophrenia or whatever, because there was no differentiation of different things. And they were in those hospitals with people who were mentally retarded and other things like that.
It's a catch-all, just
right. It was
let's
a catch-all
throw them into bedlam.
Right. But the problem is that a lot of those people who got thrown in to the asylum, say, even for schizophrenia, often after a few years would be let out without having any further episodes. And that's one of the things that started changing when they started coming up with these drugs. And the thing is that they would come back into the society and continue on with their jobs. They would go back to being a housewife or a farmer or whatever, and with no further problems or very little problems. But once we started giving people drugs, this cycle started happening where they would be hospitalized. They would come back out, they would be rehospitalized, and it would just get worse and worse and worse until they weren't able to function in society. And actually what happened was at one point in the 50s, I believe it was, they came up with the Medicare and Medicaid Act, and they actually turned all those people out of the asylums. And so they were back in the public. And then they started giving people disability payments, SSI or SSDI, and those people just kind of stayed on that public health role, that they were,
why would they want to get off of it? They're getting free money.
Well, not enough to survive on, I will tell you that.
Yeah.
So it really
my
is
mother was on disability. I mean, I know.
Yeah,
it was not enough to pay bills or her medical bills or anything.
And it really, I don't think it has to do with, I'm just going to stay on this because this is easy. These people were clinically having problems integrating back into society.
Oh, yeah, that's like a lot of like military.
Right.
PTSD. A lot of military people end up on the streets because they have a hard time, especially after times of war, coming back into society.
And one of the next question I have to offer is it possible that modern psychiatry is measuring the success? So they say these drugs are very successful, right? That they treat people. You answered part of that question. But maybe we're answering that incorrectly, because maybe are they prioritizing reduction of symptoms over the long-term recovery?
What was the question? I don't think you finished
they are, for sure.
What
was the question? You didn't finish asking the question.
That was the question. Are they incorrectly prioritizing symptom relief over long-term recovery?
Symptom relief. Okay.
Well, yes, they are, because that's what makes them the most money. That's what fuels the healthcare system is money. They want to put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and it has always been like that.
I have to tend to agree.
I mean, that is like the plain and simple. Of course, we've done episodes before where I have made my thoughts on holistic medicine known and how I don't like taking mainstream pills.
So here's my experience with my most recent diagnosis with my anxiety. So I was having panic attacks. I was just, in general, I knew something was off. I didn't feel right. I felt like my mind was imbalanced. And this was, several years ago. So I went to a neurologist because I know with my, diagnosed ADD that I do have chemical imbalance with, because they say, oh, your serotonin and your melatonin are imbalanced, right? Serotonin. So I go see a neurologist thinking, okay, she'll be able to, help me through and, even maybe give me like suggestions. No. So the neurologist, the only thing she did was prescribe me medicine. She did not give me any kind of coping mechanism skills or anything.
Oh, that's so
the
wrong.
Only thing she did was straight up gave me a prescription. She said, oh yeah, you do have anxiety. Here's some medicine, which I will say that the medicine was helpful. However, what I really needed was therapy also to go with it. And that was not part of the diagnosis or the treatment.
Lucky.
And this happens with psychiatry as well.
See, a lot of doctors are like that, sadly.
My son was, and I'm throwing him under the bus here just as an example. He was diagnosed with depression, clinical depression, and he has ADHD, and his psychiatrist wrote him a prescription for medication, antidepressant, and his ADHD medications, and suggested that he get some therapy, but
it wasn't required.
He didn't make him go, and so he has still 5 years later not gone to get any kind of therapy.
Okay, Mama, you need to step in.
Well, I have tried, and I don't know that he is dealing with the depression anymore, but he does deal with a host of other things, so it's very concerning.
Right. But the problem is that you medicate the depression to the point where it's livable. So then you
think you
tell
don't
yourself
need
you don't need it anymore because you're on the medicine.
And
right.
Yeah, that's exactly I just want to point out to that that neurologist, Kristen, that you went to was wrong. I feel very lucky because I've worked with a neurologist probably for almost 20 years now. And my neurologist that I had, his first instinct was not to put me on medication. He wanted me to get regular, because I did this for migraines, not like a chemical imbalance, but he wanted me to get regular head massages, and he wanted me to try holistic things along with the medication. He wanted me to, eat a certain diet for headache maintenance and drink less coffee. I mean, obviously I didn't listen to him on that, but you know what I mean? He had all of these other approaches aside from medication.
Right.
Yeah.
And some doctors do, and that's kind of a lot of what Robert Whitaker's talking about. And in fact, I want to go through some case studies with you and talk to you about them in a minute. But you talk about this. You both mentioned chemical imbalance. And if you read the book, and I'm not going to go through everything in this book because it took me weeks just to annotate half of the book. I was telling Amber before we started, I have so many notes in this book. There's no way I could cover all the material in this book because it is so detailed. There's so much factual, statistical data. And in order to really understand it, you have to read it to get that data. And but one of the things that has always been touted with these drugs to treat mental illness is that there's a chemical imbalance. That is the phrase they coined. But the fact of the matter is there is no physiological actual chemical imbalance that has yet to be discovered.
Yes, one never took a scoop of my brain and measured out
or measured the chemicals.
Of it.
No,
exactly.
There is no chemical. The chemical imbalance that they talk about does not exist. They just use it, and here's what happens
to give you medication.
What happened when they were, and I'm going to give this as a very brief thing, because like I said, this is covered in detail in the book, and it's fascinating to discover how they came up with some of these drugs. But it all came about because of the Alexander Salk discovering that there were microbes that made people sick, and that if you could kill the microbes, you could control the diseases. Mm-hmm. And then they came up with penicillin and all these other things that killed the biological bacterias and stuff like that. And so these doctors started doing research all over the world, to try to find more magic medicine like penicillin to cure all these other different things. And they used every kind of chemical that you can think of, including arsenic, dyes, carpet dyes, and all these other things. And what they found was that if they gave animals first and then people certain chemical compounds, that it would slow their behaviors. It would make people who are agitated act more calmly. And then when they took those drugs away, they went back to their normal state. So they decided after they found, through all these processes, they finally discovered serotonin and dopamine and all these neurochemicals in your brain. Mm-hmm. And when they were able to track those and trace those by the use of different dyes in the brain, they were able to see that when they gave someone medication that changed the way the dopamine and the serotonin and everything reacted in the brain, they just assumed that it was fixing a chemical problem, but it wasn't really a chemical problem. They were actually, according to him, creating a chemical problem.
Oh, for sure. That sounds totally like that.
So what happens is with some of if you read all the way the literature works, for instance, with a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, which is a common antidepressant, what happens is you have these neurons in your brain that send out serotonin into this gap. And then the other end of this gap is a receptor. And so they're like keyed to work with each other. And the serotonin only goes into one kind of lock, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what happens is the serotonin goes over and it makes you feel happy or whatever. But only while it's in this gap. So once it's into the key, then it is rebuilt in your brain and, dissolved or however it works. So what they were figured out is by administering these drugs, it kept the serotonin in the gap. So it blocked those little receptors to keep them from absorbing or reuptaking the serotonin. So the serotonin stays in the gap, and therefore people are less depressed. They're more happy. But what happens is that over time, the brain says, oh, there's too much serotonin floating around in here. We need to make more receptors. And so they create more receptors. And so the brain is always adapting to the medication, creating more and more and more receptors.
That's why you have to up your medicine
continually,
every couple of years.
Right. Mm-hmm. So then they notice that when you abruptly take the medicine away, all of a sudden
you have too many
you have too many receptors and not enough serotonin. And so therefore that's the chemical imbalance that they talk about, that there's not enough serotonin in the gap but then the brain starts making more serotonin. And so you get into this vicious cycle of too much serotonin, not enough, right?
Yeah.
And it's all created by the drugs. If you look at people before they are medicated, then those studies show that there is no visible, conceivable difference in the amount of serotonin or serotonin receptors in the brain between depressed people and people we deem normal. There is no difference whatsoever. So that's where that question comes in. Is it really, are we wagging the dog or is the dog wagging the tail, So it's kind of a big question there. So what if that chemical imbalance explanation was really just a marketing slogan more than scientific fact, which is the other question that he poses. And he kind of goes through to show how it really was a marketing thing. And I want to talk to you about some of that. So if you go to a drug symposium or a symposium put on by the American Psychiatric Association, what you will find was that these doctors would go to a press conference every day, and they would talk about how we need to get the message out that psychiatry is a treatment and it works, it's effective, and our diseases are just as real as cardiovascular disease and cancer. So they're doing this huge media campaign, trying to get people to believe that mental illness is real, which, I mean, we're not saying mental illness is not real, but it's this whole big thing. Every day, a big rah-rah statement saying, help us spread the word that this is real, and so people will get behind it, right? But then you go onto the exhibition floor, and you'll see that there's all these drug companies, and they're pushing their different drugs for different things. And there's all these little trinkets. Doctors go around, and if you're a doctor and you go to like Pfizer, every day Pfizer has some new little trinket to give you to thank you for being there, to convince you to use their products, whatever. And Kristen can attest to this, like the drug reps would come into your...
They would order catering and then take it to the doctor's offices and do a presentation and feed them lunch.
Yes.
And then drop off those little goodies like notepads and pens. I remember Amber's mom used to give us notepads all the time.
Oh, gosh, she had because she worked for years and years, well, mostly like her whole life in the mental or in the health care industry, and she had like pens and notepads and everything. And my mom and I used to go to health fairs and get all of the free stuff.
That's what this is talking about. And he's talking about the 2008 annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association, and Pfizer was like one of the primary booths that everybody seemed to like, and it was because every day they would have some new personalized gift with the doctor's name on it. So they had a list of all the doctors attending.
Already created. For everyone to stop by and pick it up.
And one day you could get your name printed on a mini flashlight. And the next day it would be a mobile phone charger. And all these different things. And they had games that you played to tell you how well you answered questions about one of their new drugs. And you could win prizes for that. And they had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, all paid for as part of this thing. And it was like a sumptuous free meal to the doctors. And it was followed by talks on a chosen topic. And often those talks were being paid for, and the breakfast was being paid for by the drug companies. So they're dining and wining and dining them.
They're living in a commercial.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And and the experts that they're hiring to come talk about these illnesses and drugs are often experts that are hired by the drug companies. They're paid by the drug companies to speak.
Public speakers. Yeah.
They are
supposed
experts in this field, but they're
paid
on the
rhetoricians.
Yes, and they're on the advisory boards and things like that. And often they receive research grants. In one particular person that he names in here, who was popularizing juvenile bipolar disorder at the time. He received research grants from 8 firms, acted as a consultant to 9 pharmaceutical firms, and served as a speaker for 8. It's just they
literally paid him money to do research for them, and then paid him to say what they wanted him to say.
They wanted him to say. And this is like known. Everybody knows that this is the way it works.
A snake oil salesman.
Yes,
like that. These companies hire just like car companies do the same thing. They hire these people that are really good at rhetoric to come in and
snakes in the grass,
persuade people to do their bidding.
And by contrast, they would also have certain people like Martin Harrow, who would come to give a study of long-term schizophrenia outcomes, but they gave him only 20 minutes to do his talk, and his session was assigned to one of the convention center's smallest rooms. They gave a slightly larger room for a forum titled Antidepressants in Bipolar Disorder, and these were top bipolar experts in the country, and they put them in this tiny room because they said that the illness was being altered by the drugs. Mm-hmm. So it was saying something other than what the pharmaceutical companies wanted them to say. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff like this. So basically we've been sold this, according to this, a bill of goods, and are they really, is there really this chemical imbalance? And, at what point is the marketing more a part of it than the actual truth? And here's one of the questions he asks is, can a treatment be considered effective if it helps in the short term, but worsens the long-term outcomes?
Well, so in my experience with antidepressants and such, is that, I have never been shy about talking about my mental health and the struggles that I've gone through my whole life.
Which is why I've brought this up, because I think we've all shared a bit of that.
I have been on, and I'm not going to name everything that I've been on over the years, but I have been on a good portion of what they have available out there in different combinations and in different experimental ways. And Kristen could probably, because we were living together, point out the first time I was ever put on a mental health medication. We were living together at the time, and I was seeing the psychiatrist at UNT, the college that I was going to at the time, and he put me on a medication, and then I started it, and literally the next day I had the whole house cleaned. Do you remember that? You were like, wow. Because I had completely cleaned my room. It was a mess, and then everything was organized.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably stayed up half the night doing it, and I remember Kristen coming in and being like, wow, what happened?
Yeah. I remember the first time I took my Lexapro medicine.
Which is an anti-anxiety.
It's an SSRI.
It is an SSRI. Okay.
And it it literally, like, the doctor was like, oh, you're not going to notice it, because it takes a long time for it to enter your system and blah, 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 blah. No, it was like I took it and then, hours later,
it was
I could tell. Like, I felt
bam.
so much lighter. And
since you named yours, mine was Prozac.
Yeah, yours is a lot, like, more direct. Like, that one, I think, runs a lot faster in your system. I believe Prozac,
and
right?
It was one of the first ones.
Most of my life, over the past 20 years, that's like been the one of like the biggest thing that I've been off and on over the past 20 years has been Prozac, because it works so effectively in the short term. And like, this is my struggle with mental illness medications, is that my struggle is that like I will get to a point where I probably need something, like Kristen was talking about, panic attacks, not wanting to get out of bed, because I have a generalized anxiety disorder, and I have bipolar disorder, and I have an eating disorder. So I have like all of these things that society would say is wrong with me. OCD, ADD, like I have these things that are kind of bounce off of each other. They really like are related in one way or another. And so I've been on medications such as this on and off for the past 20 years or longer now, actually, like since I was 18, 17, 18, pretty much. I think like the first thing that I ever took that my doctor prescribed me like in high school was Ativan. But then my doctor in college put me on Prozac, and so it's been like escalated on and off ever since. And I'll get to a point where like I feel like I need it. I'm having ultra panic attacks, really bad panic attacks, can't get out of bed. And so then I'll go and I'll ask the doctor to put me back on it. And then it's good. Life is good for a while. Everything's good until it stops working. Just like the book says.
Right.
Like this is my experience with it. And I've been on many different combinations, many different medications, and it's all the same result, is that yes, I do realize that it has to, like, you have to like give it 50-50 and you have to go and continue it, but it does stop working after a while. And then that's when you're like, increase the dosage, and then there's a point where you get to the highest dosage and it's not working. Like, the only way to like really get it to work is to like cut yourself off of it and be off of it for a while and then get back on it, and then it'll start working again.
And his argument is because, as he points out, it's effective in the short term, which is what you're talking about. But over the long term, your brain starts to adapt to it, and it compensates for the changes.
It's like any diet plan,
right? Your brain starts compensating. The medication causes these changes to your brain, and so your brain tries to make up for it by doing the opposite. So his point is that over time, he believes that those changes become permanent. And if you stay on these medications long enough, with that increasing dosage and adding more meds on to counteract the side effects and more different cocktails of medication, that eventually you come to this point where you can no longer function and you become disabled and you can't get off of the drugs. And his point is that he believes they should just be used temporarily. So I want to go into, as I mentioned, I have several case studies, and I want to talk to you about these case studies because my first thought when I read these, each one of these case studies, I thought, well, why did they do that? Or why did they assume that? So I want to see what you think and kind of interrupt me or whatever as I read these. I'm gonna read them off. So we're gonna start with Kathy. Kathy was initially diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1978, and then it was later changed to schizoaffective. And she says she was saved by an atypical antipsychotic called Risperdal. Mm-hmm. When you look at her story, you will find that her 2 older brothers bullied her. And on more than one occasion, starting when she was quite young, several boys in her neighborhood molested her.
I was about to say, she has PTSD before you even got to that.
Yeah.
When you said she had 2 brothers, I said she has PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Okay. She said she cried all the time when she was a child, and she would pretend to be sick so she didn't have to go to school. Mm-hmm. Her story does not mention ever receiving any treatment for those occurrences. She did okay in high school, but she was a difficult teenager, hostile, angry, and withdrawn. During her second year in college, it got worse, and she started partying. She was eager to have sex, but at the same time worried about losing her virginity, and she started to flunk out of school. She was smoking marijuana and began acting in an eccentric manner. One night, for no reason, she threw away her glasses while she was walking home, and she would often wake up at 4 a.m. to go for walks. She started having delusions and paranoia, and the breaking point happened one evening when she threw a glass object against the wall of her dorm room, but instead of cleaning it up, she just kept walking around in it and then picking the glass out of her feet. School officials called the police, and she was taken to the hospital, and they told her that she suffered from a chemical imbalance, there's that phrase again, and put her on Haldol and lithium. For the next 16 years, she cycled in and out of hospitals. 16 years. She hated the meds. The Haldol stiffened her muscles and caused her to drool, while the lithium made her depressed. And so she would often abruptly stop taking them. And so that's why she was cycling. Because she would quit taking them.
And so they diagnosed her with...
And in 1994, she was hospitalized for the 5th time, and she occasionally heard voices and was re-diagnosed as schizoaffective and put on a cocktail of drugs: Haldol, Ativan, Tegretol, Halcyon, and Cogentin. After she was released, a psychiatrist told her to try risperidone, which was a new antipsychotic. And 3 weeks later, her mind was much clearer. The voices were going away, and she got off the other meds and only took this one drug. She's on SSDI, and she says she feels better, but it makes her so sleepy that she has trouble getting up in the morning, and she has always had trouble getting along with other people, which the Risperdal exacerbates. And it apparently interferes with your empathy. And so she also has metabolic problems such as high cholesterol and weighs 60 pounds over what would be ideal, which is common with this drug. So, so a lot of these drugs cause you to gain weight.
Right.
And this is a common story here.
Yeah.
She's also developing tardive dyskinesia. You've probably seen ads for that on TV too, right?
Yes.
So that's it means that the basal ganglia in the part of the brain that controls motor movement is becoming permanently dysfunctional. That's a side effect of these drugs.
I mean, she's taking Halcyon. That's a sedative.
Yes. So she's taking all these things, and there is no mention of her ever being treated for being molested or receiving any counseling to deal with the bullying of her brothers. And keep in mind, this was 1978, so it probably wasn't common then. And even if she reported being molested, probably
nobody would have cared. Like, they would have
anything.
Just been like, suck it up and rub some dirt on it.
Right. And when she went to the hospital and they diagnosed her with the chemical imbalance, my question is, did they never take her personal history?
No, they just wanted to give her medicine.
So
they wanted to get her out of there.
And the question that he asks is if she had not been immediately placed on lithium and Haldol, and the doctors had instead tried other means like rest, psychological therapies, etc., or if she'd been stabilized on those medications and then encouraged to wean off, would she have spent 16 years cycling through hospitals?
Had they had treated it when she was a child and identified that something was wrong with her, because she has child PTSD. That's why she didn't want to go to school, because she probably was alone with her brothers on the way to school. Like, they probably walked to school together or something, and they bullied her and made her cry all the time. And then she went to school, and the other kids...
The kids who molested her were probably there also.
And that's why when she went to college, she was on her own, and she had to fend for herself, so she pushed other people away, and that's why she escaped into marijuana.
And we will
talk.
The
glass thing is like a total reaction to all of that.
She just went numb.
She overstimulated with feelings and emotions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So she
says, common, overstimulation thing, like breaking things.
The thing I remember looking back is that I was not really that sick early on. I was really just confused. I had all these issues, but nobody talked to me about that. So I'm feeling like she was totally misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
And then the drugs themselves start, like I say, reacting, and you have these different reactions to the drugs, and we'll talk about some of that too.
Drugs, one drug bred to another drug, which caused a body problem, with bred to another drug.
Right.
And so then, like, she was depending on medication for 16 years.
Right. But the medication, she was going on it, and then she'd go off of it, and then she'd have a reaction to going off of it, a relapse, as they would call it. I think it's more of a reaction, but we'll talk about that. So the next one is George. Let's talk about George. George was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He remembers being different as a child. He felt isolated from the other kids, partly because his Puerto Rican parents spoke only Spanish. He'd want to talk to other kids, but he was always apprehensive. His father was an alcoholic who often beat him, and he began to think that people were always plotting and wanting to hurt him. He got into the disco life, because he's an older person, and started doing amphetamines, marijuana, and cocaine. He said the drugs relaxed him, but then it got out of hand, and the cocaine started making him think all crazy. He got paranoid. Eventually, he ran off to Chicago and withdrew from the world. And eventually, his parents and his family coached him to come back home, and they took him to a psychiatric unit where he was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. He hated Haldol and the other antipsychotics that he was told to take because of the drug-induced despair, and he tried to kill himself multiple times. So apparently one of the bad side effects of the antipsychotics is, and especially lithium is one of them too, that it causes depression. So
so many of if you ever listen to the fast talking verbiage at the end of those commercials, a lot of the pharmaceuticals that they advertise on TV right now, thoughts of suicide.
Yes.
So many of them.
Yes.
Like, I've thought about taking the psoriasis ones. It's not even just mental health medication.
Oh, yeah.
It's like your physical health medication. They've got stuff out there for psoriasis and heart disease.
And doesn't it make you wonder, why are they advertising this stuff to you? Is it because the doctors aren't prescribing enough of it? So they want
they got to put it on the TV.
They got to put it on the TV so that you can go ask for it. Yeah.
But yeah, I thought about taking it for the psoriasis, and I'm like, do I want dry, flaky skin or thoughts of suicide? I'll take dry, flaky skin.
Right.
You know, a lot of medications say that as a side effect, including the mental health medications.
Yeah.
Thoughts of suicide.
Yeah, even antidepressants.
The symptoms of the medication.
One of the symptoms of antidepressants is thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
You know, you're taking, you're suicidal and you're depressed. And then the doctor wants to put you on this medication that gives you thoughts of suicide. Or... okay, so you have OCD and you have a compulsion to want to, like, do compulsory things. And one of the side effects is compulsion.
Yeah.
Like, one of the side effects to one of the medications that I've taken in the past was a compulsion. And the doctor's like, let me know if you have any kind of compulsion to want to like go and buy things and, you know, spend all your money or go gambling or something like that. And like, yes, I did have a side effect for one of my medications in the past.
I know someone else
go do that
who has those compulsions as well. So yeah, this, and he's talking about he was in and out of state-run hospitals and stuff like that. He tried to have a pistol smuggled into one of the hospitals so he could kill himself. And so they put him in a locked facility. And then he got upset because several of his fellow patients weren't allowed to go home for Christmas. So he helped them escape through a broken window. And they put him in the institutionalized ward where the people, you know, urinated on themselves. He was like among the worst of the worst. And he's, because they said he was a danger to society, and they kept him so drugged up that all he could do was sit and watch TV all day. And he spent 8 months on that ward, lost in a haze of drugs, as he puts it. But once he was moved out of that ward, he did something very risky. He started tonguing his pills and not swallowing them, and spitting them out when the staff wasn't looking. And all of a sudden, he was back to more of his normal self.
Clarity.
Yes, he could think again and all that, and he started feeling great. And he did not have any experience of a return to psychotic symptoms for a long time. And he had met someone in that community, and they got together and they had a son. But because he was still living in a residence for the mentally ill, the state did not think he was fit enough to care for his son. And so the baby was given to his wife's sister to raise. And eventually he got custody, but he's still on SSDI. But he does contract work for the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Services Health Administration. And he does volunteer work with the hospitalized youth in Long Island. So here's the question about George. Given that his recovery began when he stopped taking antipsychotics, is it possible that some people ill with serious mental disorder like schizophrenia or bipolar illness might recover in the absence of medication, which is what used to happen before these medications
right. Honestly,
existed?
George and the first person, Kathy, I believe her name was, both of them sought escapism through drugs.
Yes.
And his initial problems with that fear of being like attacked and stuff is a result of his PTSD from his abuse as a child. And when you start adding methamphetamines and cocaine to where you already have paranoia, it creates
more paranoia
and paranoia.
Absolutely.
Which is very hard to combat without overcoming the PTSD.
Exactly.
And then just to turn around and medicate him with something else, that's just like that cocktail, you know, problem there. Probably he got better after he was no longer in that situation where, you know, him trying to help people escape, that was his like fight or flight.
Right.
That was part of that paranoia. Those other drugs they gave him also added to that paranoia.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so this one is Monica. She was born in 1967 to an accomplished family. Her mother was a professor at Wellesley, and her father taught at several Boston area colleges. She was a child who excelled at whatever she chose to do. She earned top grades and followed a particular talent for art and writing. She received several scholarship awards and went to Middlebury College in Vermont in the fall of 1985. A month into her freshman year at Middlebury, she was blindsided by a severe depressive episode that seemed to have no cause. And we'll talk about that too. She never had emotional problems before, and nothing had happened at Middlebury, and yet the depression hit her with such force she had to leave school and return home. She was someone who had never quit anything before, and she thought her life was over. This was a failure she could not recover from. She eventually returned to Middlebury a few months later, taking an antidepressant, disipramine. But drugs didn't just bring her spirits back to normal. They soared beyond, and she had energy to burn. She took long runs, threw herself into her art. She had so little need to sleep that she started a t-shirt business. This sounds like Amber after her medication.
So I was just thinking, I want to go on long runs. I should have started doing that.
This goes on for several weeks, and then she would crash for what seemed like forever. This was the start of her long battle with bipolar disorder. Depression had given way to mania, followed by worse depression. She managed to complete her freshman year with an A-, but she began cycling through depressive and manic episodes, and by May of her sophomore year, she got down handfuls of sleeping pills trying to kill herself. Over the next 15 years, she was hospitalized 30 times. While lithium kept her mania in check, the suicidal depression always came back. Her doctors prescribed one antidepressant after another. And in 2001, after she was fired from a job for having stayed home for a week due to her depression, her suicidal impulse returned with a vengeance. She bought a gun only to have it misfire 6 times. Wow. 6 times. And when she tried to shoot herself, and she spent 3 nights on a bridge that crossed the highway. She was hospitalized several times, and then in 2002, her mother died from pancreatic cancer, and her mental struggles took an even worse turn. She says, "I'm psychotic, hallucinating, seeing things. I think I have superpowers and can change the way time flows. I think I have 10 feet wings and I can fly."
That was mania talking.
That was the year she went on SSDI. In 2006, she stopped taking antidepressants, and that triggered a dramatic change. Her depression lifted, and the lithium she has continued to take has its drawbacks. Her ability to create artwork is gone. She has a thyroid problem and suffers from tremors, but her kidneys are fine. So kidneys is apparently also an issue. So how did someone so smart and accomplished end up on that government program, SSDI? Did she suffer her first manic episode because she was bipolar, or did the antidepressant induce the mania? How often do stories tell of people becoming bipolar after their initial treatment with an antidepressant?
Interesting. Definitely, like, the antidepressants killed the creativity in her, because I can attest this personally, don't create and write as much as I did before I went on antidepressants.
Yeah, because antidepressants not only...
It just kind of numbs
They take
things.
the high stuff and take it down, and then they take the low stuff and bring it up, so you're in this spot in the middle.
Well, even since
so you feel less.
Even in, like, the periods that I've been off of it throughout the last 20 years, I've never gotten it back.
Right.
Like, I used to write every day, all the time. I used to be super creative. I still think that I am super creative. It's just locked up inside me. And very rarely will it come out to play.
Right. Well, and here's another question about her. So the three of us, have concluded from these other stories that the first two were
drugs.
They
Hers,
were or misdiagnosed in some way because of PTSD or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Hers, she was not taking any drugs. She had no childhood anything. But here was the red flag for me. She went to school and everything was great until
mid-semester
of her freshman year.
She
what
was homesick.
happened?
She went from this home that was well up. You know, her parents were probably very present in her life. She had high standards for herself as far as how she conducted herself. I mean, she was going to a good college. She had great grades. It sounded like she had a lot of hobbies and a lot of ambitions. And then you go to college and it is like shocker syndrome.
Yeah.
Where suddenly you have all these rules and expectations.
And you're a small fish in a big pond.
Yep.
And this happened. How many freshmen? I mean, they talk about the freshman 10, the pound, the weight that you
15,
gain,
yeah,
or 15,
freshman
15,
and mine was like 30.
Well,
and a lot homesick,
but a lot of kids struggle with depression and
that's
anxiety.
why they should go to counseling services.
Right.
I don't think that the colleges really advertise that they get free counseling services.
Yeah, they really don't. And I think
she left school and went home.
Yeah.
She was homesick.
I think so
why.
Too.
And honestly, like for kids who are really close with their parents and are used to having their parents like a part of everything, you know, didn't mention her siblings, so I'm assuming she's the only child from very well upbringing. You know, she was obviously very close with her mother as well, you know, and so for her to go off to school, and obviously, you know, this is in the 80s, it's not like she could pick up her phone and just call her mom. Because even when Amber and I went to school, we had to buy calling cards.
Yeah, it's long distance.
Yeah, we had to have like
you write letters.
Thing.
And she was in Vermont, and her parents were in Boston. So
so she was far enough away that it wasn't like she could just drive home every weekend.
Right.
And she was absolutely homesick, and she was shocked with the environment change, because you go from, you know, being at home and having dinner with your parents and hanging out with your best friends from high school and a close-knit community, right? Because if her parents were wealthy, they may have been part of like country club or something like that. And then to go to school and, like you said, you're a big fish or a little fish in a big sea, and then your routines suddenly change. Even those type of things for people, a lot of times, like creatives, need something to ground us, to keep us anchored, so that we stay on routine, because creative people tend to just be a little out there and a little adventurous and, you know, have odd sleeping hours and, you know, maybe a little out of control. And for someone who has really good grades and high self-respect, because they did say, you know, she had worries about, what was that, about her it was something about her self-dignity or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, when she quit and went home, she was she felt like, this is terrible. It was a failure, and she thought she would never recover from it, because she wasn't someone who quit. And yet she quit school and went home.
Yeah. And so then to add on to that, she's now feels like a failure. So then they slap her with like all these other things. And really, she just needed a guidance counselor.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, you know, when I read these stories, it makes me wonder how many times this happens, you know. So I want to tell you about some more people, okay?
Okay.
So Doria was 25 years old in 2002. And she would have told you that she was bipolar. She said it. She's been diagnosed since 1998. Her psychiatrist explaining that she suffered from a chemical imbalance. And then by 2002, she was on a cocktail of drugs that included the antipsychotic Zyprexa. I'm sure you've heard of that one too.
Yes.
By the fall of 2008, she was off all psychiatric medication and had been for 2 years. She believes she was one of the millions of Americans caught up in a frenzy to diagnose this disorder. Remembering herself as a child, she said she was extremely smart at the far end of that spectrum, and she was really a geeky kid, but she had friends. She was skillful at social navigation. She was also a funny kid. If there was anything in her life that was a mess, it was that she was overly emotional, prone to angry outbursts and crying jags.
Wow.
Okay?
That sounds like me.
She was delightful but odd. She found things that she could excel at, and so she started playing the trumpet, and she had a particular talent for mathematics. She ran on the track team and had many friends. She remained quite emotional in high school, and that part of her personality never went away.
What year is this again?
She was 25 in 2002. So
yeah,
she's like a decade older than us.
Not even a decade older. She's
early,
like maybe
early
half
emo.
A decade over
not even that. She's like 4 or 5 years older than you.
So Gen X emo.
Yeah. But her overly emotionalness was a real source of distress in her life. But she was also coming to understand that she was a lesbian. Her parents were extremely conservative Christians, and when she came out to them, it was such a big scene that she barely spoke to them for the next 2 years. She struggled constantly with her emotions, often crying in public, and soon she began seeing a therapist who diagnosed her as depressed. Talk therapy didn't provide much relief, and then during the final week of spring of '98, she found that she couldn't sleep. When she showed up at her therapist's office, agitated and a little manic, he had a new explanation: bipolar illness. Okay. So she got put on a cocktail that included a mood stabilizer, an antidepressant, and benzodiazepine for anxiety. But the exact combination was always changing. Eventually, she was put on an antipsychotic, Zyprexa, which she said worked like a charm. She loved it. She felt like she finally had the answer because she had no emotions. It was great. She wasn't crying anymore. Unfortunately, she slept 10 to 12 hours a day and began to gain weight, putting on 30 pounds. And even though she had made it through college and a PhD degree, she began to believe that she wouldn't be able to handle the stress of postdoctoral research. After she stumbled on some literature that raised questions about Zyprexa's long-term safety, it led her to wean herself off the drug. And while the process was pure hell, as she put it, she suffered terrible anxiety, severe panic attacks, paranoia, and horrible tremors. She eventually did get off that medication. And then she decided to see if she could get off the benzodiazepine. And that turned into another horrible withdrawal experience, where she had such severe headaches that she would be in bed by noon. She was gradually undoing her drug cocktail, and that caused her to question her bipolar diagnosis. She first saw a doctor because she cried too much. There had been no mania. Her sleeplessness and agitation hadn't come until after she had been placed on the antidepressant. Could she just have been a moody teenager who had some growing up to do?
Possibly.
So, my first thought was that she's an empath. She wears her heart on her sleeve, and she's very attuned to the emotions. And I think that's where a lot of people get the bipolar whenever they see the highs and the lows. Like, oh, when I get sad, I get really sad. And when something is happy, I get really happy. And that's not the same as bipolar, like what they're saying bipolar is. And for me, it seems like, you know, she had strong emotions and she was coming of age and she lost her family because of that time, you know.
Yeah, in her own words, she came out to her family as a lesbian and she had no family support, and that would be just very distressful.
That's distressing. Yeah. Like that's like.
And she also states that when I was bipolar, I had an excuse for any unpredictable or unstable behavior. Mm-hmm. I had permission to behave that way.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like when you think about, okay, I just told the people that I should really trust the most in the world about something and they rejected it.
Yes.
That's the ultimate rejection. It's not even like being dumped or divorced. That's your born parents rejecting you. And that would cause immense anxiety moving forward, because from then on, being true to yourself would trigger you to feel anxiety.
Right. Because the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally couldn't deal with it. Right. Yeah.
And so she went 2 years with that. 2 years of not having your family as support.
Yeah.
And the regret and the grief, because there's regret.
And she's already dealing with something that is stressful in and of itself, because she was just beginning to realize that she was lesbian. Yeah. So, yeah.
So when you put all of the emotions, and having someone with heightened emotions experience something really strong like that, I could see where dealing with that for 2 years would cause her, to have panic attacks and sleep issues.
Right.
And then to be put on benzodiazepine, which is literally like pressing the brakes, slamming on the brakes on your emotions.
Uh-huh.
And so, because those are really strong medicines.
Yes, they are. And that's what she said. She felt great. She had no emotions at all.
Right.
So, yeah.
And for someone who's an empath, I could see where that's alluring sounding.
Right.
But over time, because
it's not going to last.
No, it's not. To live everything in gray. Right. Like Amber said, to be on something like Xanax or Valium or Klonopin or something like that, that is literally going from if you think about emotions as colors, if you have heightened emotions, it's like you see colors other people don't see.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's more extreme.
There's more degrees.
And then to go from like all the degrees of emotions to just gray, you're going to lose out on a lot. The things exactly. Amber's like, my hand is up, because your creativity is
well,
fed
like
on those
I
things.
think out of all of the stories, this one hit me the most because it is very similar to things that I have gone through in the past.
And this poses the question that if you expand on the boundaries of mental illness, which is clearly what happened in the last 25 years, we started identifying everything before that was just depression or schizophrenia. And now they've started coming up with anxiety disorders and ADHD and bipolar disorders, and there's multiple different categories of bipolar disorder. So there's bipolar 1, bipolar 2, and bipolar with mixed episodes, and there's just all different things. So if we've expanded that boundary that they call mental illness, and then you treat everyone who's diagnosed with psychiatric medications, do you run the risk of turning someone who's just having PTSD, well, I say just having PTSD, or just an angst-ridden teenager into a lifelong mental patient, right? So, okay, the next two that I have for you, and I'm going to try to keep these short because we're running long on time here, are children. And these are another big point in his epidemic story. So Nathan is 8 years old and the son of a biracial couple who have 2 children, Nathan and Alia. Nathan spent most of the time during his meeting with the author drawing pictures in a sketchbook with colored pencils. His parents began to worry about him when he was 3. They noticed that he was hyperactive. He couldn't sit through a meal. He couldn't even sit down. Dinner time consisted of him running around the table. It was the same thing in preschool. He couldn't sit still, and he wasn't sleeping either. It would take until 9:30 or 10 o'clock to get him to go to bed. He would be kicking and screaming, and these were not normal temper tantrums. The pediatrician was reluctant to diagnose him, so they took him to a psychiatrist who quickly, and this I have a question about this, quickly concluded that Nathan suffered from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And we can talk about this some more too. They explained that it was a chemical in kind, and they put him on Ritalin. He was so hyper that the school didn't even want him to go to kindergarten, okay? On the medication, there was some trial and error, but the high dose of Ritalin caused him to be like a zombie. They switched him to Concentra, a long-lasting stimulant, and he began to exhibit obsessive behaviors. He was put on Prozac to control those.
Wow.
Okay, this is a child.
He's 8 years old.
Okay, and we'll talk about that too, okay?
Talk about developmental delays.
And they did that to control the symptoms. And while he was on the 2-drug combo, he started having terrible rages. He kicked out his bedroom window during one episode and repeatedly threatened to kill his sister and even his mother. Oh, wow. He was taken off Prozac, and although his behavior improved somewhat, he continued to be quite aggressive, and he was diagnosed as suffering from both bipolar and ADHD. And the mother says, they say that ADHD and bipolar go hand in hand, and now we know that he's bipolar too. We think he will probably be on drugs for the rest of his life.
Oh my gosh, and this kid is going to grow up and be on disability. He will never be able to function in society.
Well,
he
yeah,
can't even
like
go to kindergarten.
with all of the drugs that they're putting him on, he's never going to have like more than like a basic job. He's never going to have,
Honestly,
he'll be stuck with his parents for the rest of his life.
At 8 years old, he was taking Concerta in the morning, Ritalin in the afternoon, and 3 doses of Risperdal, an antipsychotic, at various times during the day. He's still moody, but he doesn't fly into total rages. He does struggle with his schoolwork, but he's moving from grade to grade, and he gets along fairly well with his classmates. The biggest worry is that the medications may be stunting his growth, which is a known side effect. However, the medical professionals that are treating him don't talk much about how the drugs may affect him over the long run. They aren't worried about that. It's helping him for now, said his father. So so I have problems with them diagnosing him as ADHD at 3 years old because
you're not supposed to coming from like from the mental health perspective is that you're not even supposed to. I mean, okay, now they're doing this earlier and earlier, but it used to be. You were not even supposed to diagnose a child until they turned
in
18.
School. Yeah. Oh, no. Now when Kristen...
Like for bipolar disorder and everything like that?
Yeah.
You're not even supposed to diagnose a child until they're over 18.
But like ADHD...
Yeah, that's a different story.
They used to say that you couldn't diagnose them until they were in school, at least.
Yeah.
Now he was diagnosed pretty early with the ADHD.
Yeah, that's too early.
And the key word that jumped out at me was that the doctor quickly diagnosed him. Now I know from personal experience with Kristen, we used a neurologist to diagnose her, and it was a very long, drawn out process. Months. It took them months to diagnose her because they put her through a battery of tests. We had to fill out 3-inch thick stacks of paper, and
her teachers probably had to fill out stuff
those
because I've had to fill out.
Yes,
and
huge
the same
packets
with like
of papers.
autism and stuff like that. Like I have to fill out paperwork, and then the special education teacher has to fill out paperwork. The parents have to fill out paperwork.
Exactly.
Multiple doctors have to be involved.
Yes, and we had a psychologist, a sociologist. We had the school involved.
Now you get diagnosed on an app.
Yeah, really, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, but it's true.
No, like it's true. Yeah,
so I'm thinking the first thing right off the bat there is he's 3 years old.
Diagnosed it.
And he's diagnosed.
3-year-olds are hyper.
Right.
And they're terrors.
3-year-olds just have terrible twos
terrible
and
twos.
threes.
And he's a boy.
And they have 2 children. Yeah. He was the oldest. They often get jealous of their younger siblings. But then they were doing all, they started giving him these things, the pediatrician didn't want to diagnose him. It was the psychiatrist who did. And so
that should have been a red flag right there.
Yes.
Pediatrician not wanting to diagnose.
Right.
And then the parents are also at fault for rushing to push a diagnosis on their child because they think they
wanted
the peace. Yes.
And that was on them, not the child.
And all of this happened before he went to kindergarten. So it's like, how do you know?
They're just like, let's just medicate my child. Yeah.
Yes.
No.
And there are cases of that where parents just don't want to deal with a hyperactive child.
Exactly. And so they want to get a diagnose and throw medication at their child.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's look at Jessica. Okay. And and actually, I want to go back to that because they put him on Prozac, and Prozac, Prozac is actually not recommended for anyone under the age of 16.
16.
Oh yeah, you have to be like cognitive aware to take something like that.
I also wanted to state that Ritalin is a stimulant, and if you do not have true ADHD, it actually works like methamphetamine,
and it will aggravate that hyperactivity.
It does.
It
and
would
that's
make
probably why
him
he got worse,
yeah.
and that's also probably why he got OCD.
And they said he was on a high dose of Ritalin, a high dose for a 5-year-old, and it caused him to be like a zombie, which that's kind of like what. But okay, so that was that. I had to say that about the Prozac,
and I'm sorry for being judgmental about that. But like,
you're going to
being
school.
a teacher and going to school for like these things. Like I could see so many red flag behaviors.
Me too. As a parent, I see things. Okay, so I'm going to back up before I talk about Jessica, the Prozac story. I want to talk about someone I know who was maybe 15, 16, something like that, when she was diagnosed with, I'm not sure if it was depression or if it was bipolar disorder, but they put her on Prozac, and it caused her to have a psychotic break.
Yeah, too young to be diagnosed.
Yeah.
For that, too young.
So I know, and at that time, this was like right about the time that they decided that Prozac was not suitable for kids. And she, I believe that the Prozac was what caused the psychotic break. And this is not uncommon. And it's so common that I was very, very worried when my son, who is old enough to take Prozac, told me that was what they put him on. And I have not seen him become psychotic, but I definitely keep an eye on his mental well-being because of that.
So did it shock you when I say that I've been on Prozac off and on since like 17, 18 years old?
Well, no, because I know your mental history to some extent. And I also know that you come from a situation where your mother worked with mental patients, and how horrified you've mentioned that she was when you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder, because she refused to believe it.
Well, she didn't want me to be on medication as well.
Because she had seen all these people who were on it.
That had been like forced in, well, I wouldn't say that they were forced. She worked for like a criminal institution.
Right.
But, like looking back and like talking about the medications and stuff like that, like how much of it for the criminal aspect, mental health, how much of it was the medication that ended them up in that situation.
Right. And that's the question.
Where they harm
I mean,
somebody
that's part of the
involuntarily.
question that he's asking.
This is why I don't understand why they diagnose Prozac, because Prozac is a SSRI, like the one that I take. The difference is that Prozac makes the edges of everything sharper. Mm-hmm. It makes you feel more alive because it treats like the deep depression so that you don't feel down and depressed. But if you have anxiety, what is it doing to your anxiety?
Right.
Oh, Prozac does not help your anxiety.
No, it
at all.
Aggravates it.
Right. It helps your depression.
One of the
you
things
have to take something else for anxiety.
One of the things that he talks about, and we will have to get into it in another episode, is that he believes that the treatment of these people like with bipolar disorder, by treating them with the antidepressant first, actually causes the bipolar disorder.
Wow.
So, and we will talk about that. But I want to get to Jessica. Jessica's
Amber
the other
and
child.
I are sitting here going, shoot, I'm on an anti-anxiety medicine right now. Like,
well, I am too. Well, I'm not on an anti-anxietal. I'm on an antidepressant. So
I'm flying free right now, guys.
Well,
I'm out there in the world flying free. I'm in between medications right now.
Okay, well, we can talk about some of that.
By the time this airs, it might be a different story. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. By the time this airs, you may decide that you don't want to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, by the time.
Okay. So here's Jessica. Jessica is 7 years old, and her behavioral problem started when she was 2, and she was sent to daycare.
Oh, so terrible twos. Oh, my goodness, no.
She got angry.
Poor child.
She would hit and bite the other children at home. I used to run a daycare center, okay?
At home? So her siblings, okay.
Oh, well, it says at home.
Yeah. Maybe the daycare was at her house.
I may have done that wrong. But anyway, so she started having night terrors and all-out meltdowns. I may have missed the punctuation. I was
Oh, okay.
I was talking to my note taking,
and now at home she's having nightmares.
Right. The mildest thing would trigger her, and she would go off. They turned to their local school district for help, and they recommended that she go to a special ed preschool. But she continued to behave aggressively at that school, and they told them to take her to the Health Sciences Center for a psychiatric evaluation. They saw the nurse practitioner, who immediately concluded that she was bipolar. Mm-hmm. The practitioner explained that Jessica had a chemical imbalance, and they put her on a cocktail of Depakote, Risperdal, and lithium.
Wow.
At 2 years old, 3 or whatever.
7 or,
yeah. She's preschool. She's still preschool.
Wow.
It blew my mind, especially the thought of putting her on antipsychotics. She was 4 years old, her father says.
Gosh.
Her mother, Kelly, works for Oswego County Family Service Agency, and she had seen many troubled children who've been put on psychiatric medications. And in that setting, the county expects parents to comply with medical advice. The Health Sciences Center told them that they would not see her again if she wasn't medicated. Right? So the experts are telling you that you need to do this and that it's biological. But Jason, her father, had previously worked as a pharmacy technician, and he knew that the drugs could have powerful side effects. They started researching the drugs and couldn't find any story that told a good long-term outcomes for children placed on those drug cocktails. Her physician told them she thought it would be absurd to put Jessica on the psychiatric drugs. And her family, the parents of her families also said that it would be a mistake. So Jason remembered how a few years earlier, talk therapy had helped him address his own anger management issues. And so they made the decision in 2005. And 3 years later, they say she's doing well. She gets mostly A's in school. Her teachers now think that her earlier bipolar diagnosis was crazy. She does sometimes quarrel with other kids, and she will lash back verbally if another child teases her. But she knows that she can't hit anyone.
Child.
At home, she still has the occasional meltdown, but her emotional outbursts are not so extreme as before. The mother gives advice that when children, this is the advice that her mother gives, is that when children are having these tirades, that you should call the child over and rub them on the back so they feel better and so they won't have a meltdown in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Because the child...
And so when the child will stop in the middle of the meltdown, and then that's what they remember is their parents giving them love and kindness and soothing. Yes.
When you said that she was in daycare, I thought, okay, what's going on at daycare? But then you said the dad has
anger management
issues.
And
then I thought, that's where it is. It wasn't the daycare. She was responding at daycare based on how she knows how to respond. Even at 2 years old,
she has observed her dad,
her parents. And even if her dad doesn't have big outbursts that hurt people,
he probably still has anger management
some type
issues.
of outburst. Yeah. And so that's her defense mechanism. That's what she's learned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right there.
And so they're really glad that she's not on any medication. Because they were afraid it would change her personality. And so here's the question for them. Did their child really suffer from a chemical imbalance?
No.
Are there any studies showing that drug treatment for ADHD or juvenile bipolar illness is beneficial over the long run? How does it affect their physical health?
Mm-hmm.
And can the child expect to become a healthy teenager, a healthy adult, if they're continuously put on these? I mean, because she was 4 years old and they already wanted her to be on 3 different medications.
Well, they already started stunting her growth.
Yeah, well, they didn't put her on the medication.
Yeah.
The doctors wanted her to be, the health department wanted her to be on those medications, but they didn't want to do it. And so the health department said, well, we're not going to see you anymore unless you medicate her, which is not right either.
No, morally, it just in general, it's not right. Did it say what state that they live in?
No. Well, they're talking about Oswego County. I'm thinking it's probably somewhere north, near the Canadian border, like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Dakotas. Because Oswego is the Native American tribe, I believe. So
yeah,
so it's probably somewhere up there.
That's scary to think about, that there are like actual like cities and states and that are counties that are insisting that we medicate our children at like 4 years old.
She's going to the county medical facility. They may have been on like Medicaid or something like that.
Well, no, they just went because they went for help because they went first to the school district because, the school district offers help for disabilities and things like that. And the school district, she was in a special ed program at preschool, but she was still behaving aggressively. So the school told them to take her to the Health Sciences Center for a psychiatric evaluation. So she was at the Health Sciences Center, but she only saw a nurse practitioner who, as the quote says, immediately concluded she was bipolar. But she was...
And that person probably did not have the credentials to conclude somebody... A child was bipolar,
and immediately did it. I mean,
like how do you just look at someone and be like, you're bipolar?
How do you talk to the parents one time and then immediately diagnose them with something like this? These kind of diagnosis would
a ruling out.
Is a ruling out, but also lots
over
of
period of time.
Talk therapy. You can't just base it on. This action or this reaction or whatever.
I think that's what the doctors fear, is that people don't want to come in and have 6 months of appointments where they talk about it. They want a solution. They expect the doctors to magically fix things.
Well, see, that is our instant gratification society now. Is that people want to go in
and have a magic pill
and be like, fix me. and not want to sit through the therapy and talk about.
They don't want to they want a magic pill.
You know, they want the magic.
They don't want to have to relive the trauma that caused them.
We're a society of Ozempic and bariatric surgery. People don't want to go to the gym and work out over a period of time and lose weight and eat healthy. They want to slash their stomach in half. Okay, and I know I'm being a little hypocritical by saying this, but then again, I had the surgery to save my life because I was dying, whereas a lot of people just go to Mexico and have the surgery because they want to lose 20 pounds and
they don't want to eat right, or they want to, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Just like,
Right. And I went through 6 months of counseling before you
had your surgery.
And like a lot of, if you just go to Mexico and have that surgery, you don't have to do the 6 months of counseling. You just can just go and make an appointment.
Right.
Talk to a doctor and be like, hey, open me up.
I agree. I think there's a lot of that. What I want to know is what's in it for the doctors. What is in it for the doctors to prescribe?
The pharmaceutical companies give them money to advertise their medication.
That is true.
It all boils down to money. How many times have I ranted about this on this podcast? It all boils down to the money.
But originally, the original psychiatrists were all students or descendants, whatever you want to call it, of Freud, who believed in psychotherapy, in counseling therapies, right? So they've changed. Psychiatry has completely changed.
That takes
from this
an
model
hour every week.
Right, but they could make money off of that.
But they can make more money if they only see you for 15 minutes. They can see 4 times as many patients.
They can see 4 people an hour. Every 15 minutes, they can see 4 people an hour and charge $200 for that 15 minutes. So that's $800 an hour. Do that 8 hours a day. How much money are you making?
Well, and that is the gross income. That is not the net.
That is. It's disgusting.
But it is still disgusting.
But like, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously, it's obvious why the pharmaceuticals do it, because they're raking money hand over fist.
It's the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies hand in hand.
As far as like therapists and like psychiatrists and everything like that are concerned nowadays, is like they're like, because I am becoming a therapist. I am a therapist in training.
Yes.
A counselor in training. Now, I am not being trained where I will be able to give medication.
Well, that's because in order to do that, you have to have a medical degree and become a psychiatrist.
I could very well go another 2 years, which I might do, and have my medical degree. But there are 2 different directions. What I'm trying to say is there are 2 different directions that you can go when you're going in the field that I'm going to. You can go into the medication part, go see 15 minutes part, or you can go into the talk therapy part. Now, some people do both.
There are
people that do both, but very rarely, it's not difficult to find somebody that does both.
Right.
But like Kristen said, why would you do both if you can just make $200 for 15 minutes versus $200 for an hour?
The insurance company comes in. If they make it separate where you have to go to 2 different doctors to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Then the insurance... Well,
I don't know if the insurance benefits off of that, but the doctors do.
Yeah. The insurance totally benefits off of that.
Because you have to pay for 2 different visits that way.
Exactly. And this is coming from like a struggle that I've had with my insurance company lately, is that, they don't want me to go to just one person. They want... And then plus I have an HMO, so I have to go to one person and do the payout for them. Then I have to go get a referral and go to the next person to do a payout, an even bigger payout for them. And then another referral to go back and get an original referral, and then get another referral to get a payout for them.
And you know what that does? That blows through your premium or your deductible for the year. Even if you have a HMO, you can still max out on that. It uses up all your insurance for the year just going for the preliminary visits. So then the only thing you can afford is the quick fix medicine. And that's how the pharmaceutical companies have the insurance companies and the doctors in a ball and chain. Because they've made it to where you have to go in this like little roundabout way to get what you need instead of direct care and homeopathic or holistic, whatever way of doing something. You have to do it in this like chain reaction result so that everybody gets paid and everyone has a little bit of buy-in and control over the others. It's their own little checks and balance system with the doctors, the insurance, and the pharmaceutical company. The doctors, their hands are tied. They can't do any treatment unless it's covered by the insurance because people don't want to pay for it unless it's covered. And then the doctors have to have this exorbitant amount of malpractice insurance also to keep themselves out of the court system. And then they have all these prescriptions that they're being, bribed into. Basically bribed into, pushing on people so that they don't have to worry about malpractice suits. They don't have to worry about doing procedures outside of the insurance, and then they get paid. They get paid for all of those exams because people have their insurance just pays for that. The customer doesn't have, the patient doesn't pay for that. The insurance does.
Yeah. And so, like, how many doctors did I have to go to? They're talking about the stepping stones. How many doctors did I have to go to be able, by the time I made it to the doctor and had my diagnosis with the cysts in my ovaries, how many doctors did I have to go to? Like, how many months was I peeing blood to be able to get these, like, sacks of poison out of my body? Like, I was going to doctors for a year to be able to make it to that surgery.
They wanted to put you on metformin first, and they said it was because you're overweight.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even. It wasn't even that. It was like
or let's give you nobody
knew what was wrong with me. They kept bouncing me to a different doctor, and and I went through like a million different tests before I even got to the one gastroenterologist test where I had to have, I forgot what it's called. A CAT scan of my body. And they just happened to stumble across the cysts because they were CAT scanning a completely different part of my body. And they just stumbled across it, and they added it in the notes as an afterthought. Well, there's nothing wrong with this part of the body. However, there are some cysts in this part of the body. And they didn't, and that was in the notes. And the doctor and I went over the notes, and the doctor was like, well, maybe you should see this doctor then about this.
But, and it comes back to, and we'll talk about this later. I mean, we're way over our time now, but, there's so much to talk about on this topic, and the misdiagnosis and the pushing for meds and stuff like that. I want to come back in the next episode and talk about how these meds that they're pushing, how they came to be, and how the pharmaceutical industry and the American Psychiatric Association came into power, where they control all these things. And then we can talk about also some of the effects of these medications and why Robert Whitaker thinks that it's becoming an epidemic. And as I said, this book is way too big to cover it in one episode. So we're going to have to break it up into bite-sized chunks. And I just wanted to leave you with those real life anecdotes of people who have had experience with this, including some of our own experiences as well. And we'll leave you with that. Think on those things. But I will say that I also have been on an antidepressant since I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Sometime after I started my medication, so it was probably 2017, early 2017. I was put on this antidepressant ostensibly to curb my hot flashes that were caused by my cancer medications. And so it wasn't even for depression, but after I got on it, I realized that my depression had abated. And I thought I was doing really well until I wasn't. So we'll come back to that story also and more in a future podcast. And I will turn this over to Amber for next week. And what are we talking about, Amber, next week?
We are talking about annotating books.
Which is what I just did for this book.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about that and the method that you use to annotate the book, Cindy. And then we're going to talk about different ways that you can annotate and how trendy annotating is becoming right now.
It has become very trendy, yes.
And we're gonna like look at that from a few different angles next week.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope you will come back and listen again, both next week to Amber's talk about annotating books, and also stay tuned for future episodes about Anatomy of an Epidemic. And think hard on those stories that we told you, and give us a shout back. Tell us what you think. Have you had any experience with any of these medications? What do you think of them and their efficacy over the long term? We'd like to hear about that. You can email us at info@modernmusings.net, or you can go over to our Facebook group, MMC Chat. And we hope to hear from you soon. And that's it for this week. Bye.